In the most holy name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, I bear witness that there is no God except that Allah is God, and I bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger. We give to Allah praise and thanks for his grace and for his mercy and for his unmatched goodness to us. We thank Allah for his divine and his merciful intervening into the rough and tumultuous affairs of our people here in America, having made his presence known in the person of Master Fard Muhammad. We not only thank him for his coming, but we thank him for his wise choice of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad to be his messenger, Messiah, the exalted Christ. And we thank these two for the one that they produced for us, for you and I in this great and dreadful day. A very critical and pivotal time in world history where you and I bear witness. It seems like chaos and confusion is everywhere. But you and I don't have to suffer from being confused, because Allah has given to us a perfect guide. And in this hour in which we live, divine guidance is one of the rarest and most precious commodities. So we thank Allah for his anointed servant, his Messiah among us, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Beloved brothers and sisters, allow me to greet you once again. Assalamu alaikum. How y'all feel today? Well, I'm very excited as well to be in Los Angeles. And I am so grateful to Allah to be with you today. I want to express my gratitude and my appreciation, first and foremost, to our great big brother. You know, I don't feel comfortable just calling him a brother, because when I joined the nation as a teenager, growing up a long way from here, all the way down in the cotton fields of the Mississippi Delta. So I'm a long way from home, but y'all done made me feel at home in Los Angeles. But when I first heard the message of Islam as a teenager, my brother was already a leading light in the Nation of Islam as a student of Minister Farrakhan, and was one of those brothers that all of us young brothers coming up in the nation during the 90s and early 2000s, we looked up to him. He's one of those brothers that, regardless of his geographic location, had a national and even global influence and impact. So it's very special and very meaningful for me to be here with one of my heroes in the ministry of Islam. And so I'm so thankful to Allah for Brother Student Regional Minister Abdul Malik Saeed Muhammad, and for his gracious invitation for us to be here with you this weekend. I want to thank the laborers and the officials, and I want to thank all of the great brothers of the FOI who have helped me and my sons to get where we needed to go and get what we needed to get. You know, anytime something is very successful, there are a lot of folk that you may not know their names or see their faces, but they are very much responsible for making any worthwhile endeavor successful. So I want to thank all of the FOI, and I want to thank all of the MGTs, because you were so gracious. All praise is due to Allah. The sisters were so gracious with us today. They'd been at their MGT class early that morning, and they let me teach for about 3 or 4 hours yesterday afternoon, and I didn't see a furrow in their brow. I didn't see any disappointment or dissatisfaction on their faces. So y'all, I'm just thankful and appreciative to be here. And it's always our prayer that we might share something with you, that at the end of our time together, you will conclude that it was time well spent. And it's always our intention to, as best we can, properly represent a man that has been so maligned and misrepresented for such a long time. And that is my teacher and yours, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Now, I want to begin this message today. You see the title slide. And, you know, as a minister, our duty is always to go into the Word of Allah and to seek to extract a message that might instruct those who have come to hear us in matters of faith and solving the problems of life. And so the tools of our trade are invariably the Word of God, whether it is the Torah, the Gospel, or the Quran. So I have to tell you something that for me, this may not be the case for you, but the words of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan comprise a sacred text for me.
Yes, sir.
Y'all cool with that?
Yes, sir.
So even though ordinarily I would select a verse from the Quran or a verse from the Bible, I'm starting today with the words of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Y'all all right? So our subject is, turn my young brothers and sisters over to the Nation of Islam. Now, how many of you were blessed to be at Savior's Day 2024? Raise your hand. All praise is due to Allah. Man, y'all traveled a long way to go to cold Detroit from sunny California. Well, you know, at the conclusion of that majestic message from Allah's anointed servant, he said this publicly to the world: turn my young brothers and sisters over to the Nation of Islam. We will teach them, we will train them, and we will civilize them. And as I thought about that clarion call from Allah's anointed servant, it made me to think about the condition of our youth all over America and the world. And so we wanted to, in the brief time that we're here today, just to look at the justification for such a call. Man basically stood up and said, I want your children. And amazingly, nobody disputed that call. Man stand up and say, I want your babies. I mean, somebody should say, wait a minute, hold on, Farrakhan. But most in Black America know that whether or not you self-identify as a Muslim or not, you know the Nation of Islam has been good for us. All praise is due to Allah. Now, a few years ago, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan came to the Breakfast Club. And he said something that was profound, yet it is controversial. He said these words: our young people represent the strongest and the best generation that we ever had. They're not the wisest, but they are the best because they are fearless. When you see fearless young men and women, that's the generation that God's hand is on, because that's the generation that will fulfill the promise of the ancestors who died struggling for true freedom, justice, and liberation. The young are the generation that will deliver on that promise with the right leadership. So this is from the sacred text that is the words of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. But as we made a reference yesterday, sometimes, ministers, you know I'm telling the truth, you can read the sacred word of God, and then you have to look at the reality in which you live, and you find an apparent conflict.
Right. Come on. That's real. Right.
Now, the weak in faith and abandon their committed to position when they find a conflict to what God has said.
Come on.
But I can tell you that what I have learned is that whenever I'm studying God's word and there appears to be a conflict with reality, that's my signal that I got to go beneath the surface.
Yes. That's right.
That's the signal to me that there's a reward awaiting me if I'm willing to plumb the depth and to reconcile the apparent conflict. Seminarians call it tension in the text. And any good sermon or good lecture will always resolve the tension that's in the text. So let's examine this sacred text, because I'm arguing that Minister Farrakhan's articulation of this regarding the youth of our community is the view of God. It's not just his personal view, just trying to make young folk feel good. No, this is God's view, and sometimes we see that there's conflict with God's word and the reality that we are perceiving, because we have yet to take the color of Allah. Surah 2, ayat 138 of the Holy Quran in the Maulana Muhammad Ali translation says, and we take Allah's color, for surely Allah is best at coloring. Comes from an Arabic word, sibgah, which means color or religion or hue. In the context of that ayat, the believers are saying, regardless of the realities that we may be beset with, we take Allah's view. We take Allah's perspective. So all over America, the streets are being filled with youth, crime, and violence. Community stakeholders, politicians, clergy, parents, activists. Everybody's scratching their head. What are we going to do with our youth? In my city, they're writing about most of the crime in the city. Young people are doing it. This is from the Tri-State Defender, the big paper in the city of Memphis. They say Memphis has long struggled with high rates of youth crime, especially among our youth. Is that true for Los Angeles? Because I don't know, I don't live here, but I do feel at home. So I have to ask you, if you live here, do you have a problem with our young people nowadays that they don't listen to mom and dad, they ain't listening to the pastor or the imam or the rabbi, but the streets is their home? They talked about all of the crime statistics in Memphis, and I was a part that said, for ages 7 to 18, Memphis is homicide and assault. That's the leading cause of death for children. My God. The statistics continue. According to Memphis Crime Stoppers, in all of 2022, there were over 70 homicide victims aged 17 or under, including at least 15 aged 12 or under. A review of child deaths by Labana Children's Hospital found that in 2020, homicide was the cause of more than 50% of all deaths among Memphis youth ages 15 to 24. Are there similar statistics for Los Angeles? So now you see that this makes what the minister says strange. How is this the best generation, Minister Malik Saeed? They're involved in all of this, and they ain't filling up the church pews. They ain't on the prayer rug at the masjid. I put this picture up here because, see, when we think about the words of the minister, how do we reconcile it with how they have portrayed black youth in the national news and the local news as violent criminals? What I found that was intriguing about this specific youth demographic is that this same generation that are the killers, they are from the same generations that are the new black political leaders. Same generation. All over America, in California, in Chicago, in Baltimore, in Atlanta, in Memphis, in Detroit, there's a cadre of young black leadership, young Hispanic leadership, young Asian leadership that is coming to give hell to the established political leadership. And it's the same age group, the same demographic. And these are brothers in the state legislature in Tennessee. This is a young man right here, brother and sister, that's an 18-year-old mayor. An 18-year-old mayor. How many of you that are older than 18 remember what you were doing at 18? You don't have to tell us what you was doing at 18, but you can remember it. Do you know that around the country, you have young progressive mayors who are leading major American cities, much to the disappointment of the established political leadership? This is Jackson, Mississippi's young mayor. His name ain't John Jackson. It's Chokwe Anta Lumumba, the mayor of the capital city in the most racist state in America, Mississippi. That's Birmingham's young black mayor. That's Baltimore's young black mayor. That brother wearing a high top fade. And he the mayor of the city. He like hip hop music and wear Jordan 1. And when the bridge came down in Baltimore, you saw the media pounced on our brother, trying to act like his response to the tragedy wasn't sufficient, and he boldly told them, I'm concerned about the people, not the money. So when the minister is looking at our youth, he's not looking at it like the media does, that only wants to see those of our babies who have fallen by the wayside. They are of the same generation as these. They just need, as the minister said, right leadership. That's right. So our subject is, turn my young brothers and sisters over to the Nation of Islam. Y'all all right? Yes, sir. Now this ain't no chauvinistic kind of thing. Y'all know these sisters who developed the Freedom Fund? Now think about something, brothers and sisters. Look at these sisters now. They are in stark contrast to the image of women that are normally put before the world, where you have images of the female rappers that the white men who control black music promote and display all over the world. Yet when these sisters said that they wanted to create a fund to support black women entrepreneurs, lobbyists are suing them in the cases at the Supreme Court level. So there is an opposition to the leadership that God has ordained to come to oppress people that the youth generation represent. Now, one of the things that also helps us to reconcile the minister's sacrosanct words is the history. Now, there's something in young people that is more of a fighting spirit. Would you agree? There was a generation that was kind of go along to get along. They basically kind of just were trying to survive. They didn't mean no harm, but you know, the white power structure had proven any Negro that would stand up to stand in opposition to their wicked authority would be put down. But what's amazing is that we're looking at a generation today that are courageous and fearless, as the minister said, and it reminded me of some of the studies that were done during the Black Power movement and the Civil Rights movement. Do you know, beloved brother and sister, that they found that when the focus of our community was on fighting the oppressor, crime was almost non-existent? This is a study called Civil Rights Activity and a Reduction in Crime Among Negroes. Listen at what they say. They say data are presented which suggest a substantial reduction in crimes of violence by Negroes in 3 cities during the periods of organized protests and direct action for civil rights in those cities. The findings are based on official crime reports, medical records, newspaper accounts, and interviews with residents of the 3 communities, 2 cities in the Deep South and 1 in a border state. It is hypothesized that Negroes release long dammed up resentment of segregation by asserting themselves directly or vicariously in direct action for civil rights. Such emotional expression, when it occurs in a framework of community organization, may reduce the need for aggressive outbursts in a violent sort, thus reducing the incidence of such crime. In other words, when we knew who the enemy was, we fought the enemy and we didn't fight one another. See, most of the rights movements, whether it was the civil rights movements or the Black Power movement, the Black Panthers, CORE, SNCC, Nation of Islam, most of those who were active fighting for freedom and liberation were the youth. Go and check the record. You had young people in leadership positions in all of these organizations that our enemy saw fit to destroy. This research is fascinating. It even shows that youth activism is good for their overall mental health and well-being. Wow. Do you all have a problem with youth mental health in Los Angeles? Yes, we do in Memphis. Right. Could it be that that which is bottled up in the babies, children of destiny, they have a fighting spirit. They know that they're supposed to be fighting something. Right. That's right. That's right. But we haven't taught them who the enemy is. And as the minister has told us, most of the old guard churches and black organizations, they forget the youth. Because they say the youth don't have no money. So we're not looking after our babies, but Satan is looking at them. He said, well, if y'all don't want them, I'll take them. I got something for them to do. This is a report that talks about how all of our great movements for freedom and liberation were peopled by the youth. Since the early 20th century, young people have been instrumental in reconstructing American political culture and the social and political life of African Americans. From the NAACP Youth Council and the Southern Negro Youth Congress in the 1930s and 1940s to the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and Student Organization for Black Unity in the 1960s and the 1970s. Young people were the front line activists. They wasn't in the back. They wasn't peripheral. Frontline activists during the two major protest waves of the 20th century. Young blacks then helped to propel the Pan-African and Black Power movement. And they give a diagram of all of the different organizations where young people were at the forefront. They even talked about this in the Muhammad Speaks newspaper. Negro crime drops in the South, busy with rights struggle. Let's let that sink into your mind, brother and sister. There was a time when we were not shooting and killing, arguing, fussing and fighting, involved in all these interpersonal conflicts. We were busy with the struggle. Our subject is turn my young brothers and sisters over to the Nation of Islam. Y'all all right? All throughout the historical record, there's another slide of the historical record where there was hardly any crime. Now, doesn't that suggest that we should be busy recruiting our young people to redirect that energy, to redirect that fearlessness? See? There's a reason why in the military, the army is called the infantry. The root word of infantry is infant. Bible says young men and women for war, older men and women for counsel. So our streets are filled with young warrior brothers, young warrior sisters, but they are not connected to the older men and women for counsel. I was watching a while back, Minister Saeed, a documentary about Los Angeles called Bastards of the Party. You may have seen it. Yes, sir. It's an excellent documentary that goes into the history of Los Angeles, specifically the emergence of the street gang culture in Los Angeles. And one of the things that they talked about in this documentary was how it says, but in the combined efforts of the FBI's notorious COINTELPRO program and the LAPD's Public Disorder Intelligence Division, maintained surveillance on every suspicious group from the Panthers to the National Council of Churches. They were concentrated upon destroying Los Angeles Black Power vanguards. That's language we know something about, don't we? The vanguards mean the forefront, right? So it's saying that the enemy was looking to destroy those in the vanguard position right here in Los Angeles. And even as Time magazine recognized, the decimation of the Panthers led directly to the recrudescence of gangs in the early 1970s. 76 Crippin, the most extraordinary new gang phenomenon, was a bastard offspring of the Panthers' former charisma, filling the void left by the LAPD SWAT team. In other words, as the enemy targeted those organizations that were drawing young people to fight against the white power structure, it left a vacuum in the community. You've heard that old philosophical truism, nature hates a vacuum.
Yeah, that's right. Hates a vacuum. That's right.
Nature hates a void.
Right.
That's why if you take away something, you better replace it with something better.
Yes, sir.
But they were fearful out of their knowledge of the time of our rise. And they know that the youth that we give birth to are those children of destiny. So they destroyed all of our movements, all of our organizations. And not only did they just leave the void or leave a vacuum, but they deliberately sought to fill it with narcotics. Now, again, our subject is, turn my young brothers and sisters over to the Nation of Islam. What is it about the nation?
Come on.
I mean, there's a lot of religions. Farrakhan could have said, turn them over to the church. He didn't say that, did he? You know, in reflection, that statement he made at Savior's Day is very significant if you compare and contrast it to what he said at the end of the Million Man March. In 95, he said, brother, go join a church or a mosque or a house of worship of your choosing. Join an organization working for the betterment of our people. But in 2024, he's reduced it down, said, no, come to the Nation of Islam. Now, I want to lift a passage from the Holy Quran that's very important as we move through this subject. I'm going to give it to you in a couple different translations because each translator presents it differently. Hopefully we get the screen back going. It's from the 22nd surah of the Holy Quran, beginning around ayat 52 and continuing to ayat 53. Listen to what Allah says to us in the Quran. And we never sent a messenger or a prophet before thee, but when he desired, the devil made a suggestion respecting his desire. But Allah annuls that which the devil casts. Then does Allah establish his messages, and Allah is knowing wise that he may make what the devil casts a trial for those in whose hearts is a disease, and the hard-hearted, and surely the wrongdoers are in severe opposition. That's Maulana Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Assad makes it a little bit clearer. He says, yet whenever we sent forth any apostle or prophet before thee, and he was hoping that his warnings would be heeded, Satan would cast an aspersion on his innermost claims, but God renders null and void whatever aspersion Satan may cast. And finally, the clear Quran even clearer. Whenever we sent a messenger or a prophet before you, O Prophet Muhammad, and he recited our revelations, Satan would influence people's understanding of his recitation. Wow. But eventually, Allah would eliminate Satan's influence. So you know, as we talked about extensively yesterday, Allah, who came in the person of Master Fard Muhammad, came to raise us from mental, spiritual, economic, all manner of death. He came to raise us. That is the desire of Allah. That is the desire of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. That is the purpose of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So when you say send the youth to the nation, We are saying, send our young brothers and sisters to us to be raised from mental death and power. All praise is due to Allah. But now for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So as Allah is saying in the Quran, Satan didn't just say, oh, Farah, you're here for the Negroes? We'll give them to you. Oh, Elijah, you want them? Fact about it, we were taught in the teachings that the devil told the Honorable Elijah Muhammad trying to teach the Negro Islam is like putting pants on an elephant. And we were told that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, I got one pant leg on already. Do you know, beloved brother and sister, you've heard of COINTELPRO, haven't you? All throughout J. Edgar Hoover's infamous history as the leader of the FBI, over and over again, he specified that not only did he want to destroy black organizations, but he wanted to keep the youth from joining them. Efforts of various groups to consolidate their forces or to recruit youthful adherents must be frustrated. No opportunity should be missed to exploit through counterintelligence techniques the organizational conflicts and personal conflicts of the leadership of the groups where possible an effort should be made to capitalize on existing conflicts between competing black nationalist organizations. He continued, a final goal should be to prevent the long-range growth of militant black nationalist organizations, especially among youth. Specific tactics to prevent these groups from converting young people must be developed. So, do you find it difficult sometimes to get a young person to come to a meeting? That ain't an organic reaction. That's a manufactured reality. He said goals of this program are to prevent the growth of these groups among America's youth. Well, what groups was he talking about? You see the one highlighted down there at the bottom? He lists the SNCC, SCLC, RAM, Nation of Islam. I don't have to tell you that today the last one standing is the Nation of Islam. And we exist and have survived by the grace and mercy of Allah against overwhelming opposition. Our enemy is the same enemy that goes all over the world and topples governments. She performs regime change all over the world. Those are the ones who want to destroy the nation. Do you know, even though much of COINTELPRO history, this is another one where we talked about how they want to prevent all of these groups, the nation especially, from having access to the media. Now, this is Hoover's playbook, but compare and contrast that to the social media ban against the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So, even though Hoover's gone, I seem to remember in our teachings, even after Yaqub died, he left literature to continue his work. Have y'all ever read that? So Mr. Hoover's gone, but in a Yaqubian way, his literature still guides the organization. Now, Professor Matthias Gardell, in his excellent book, Elijah Muhammad Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam, or in the name of Elijah Muhammad Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam, he points out something very important, because a lot of times when COINTELPRO is brought up, they always want to focus on what Hoover and the FBI did to destroy the Panthers. See? But, I'm not upset with that, because the Panthers are like the grandchildren of the Nation of Islam. They were the children of Brother Malcolm, which who was a son, even though a wayward son, of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. But he makes a very important point. He says, no research, however, has focused directly on the federal conspiracy against the Nation of Islam. This is all the more remarkable since the Nation of Islam outnumbered most, if not all, of the organizations mentioned above and was targeted prior to these. The FBI interest in the NOI is reflected in the Security Index, a listing of prominent dissidents dating from 1939. The largest category listed 673 members of the Nation of Islam, followed by only 476 communists. You know how significant that is, brother and sister? This was during the Cold War. Publicly, they were saying that their greatest fear was communist Russia. Yet privately, they were more concerned about the Nation of Islam spreading in the black community in America. All praise is due to Allah. So regardless of what you hear about their concern of all other groups, you and I are their greatest target. Because in this little nation, the little nation that could, like Noah's Ark sometimes, that the Quran described as being put together with planks and nails. It was a cruise ship. But when Allah unleashed the flood, it floated along in Allah's sight. Now, keep in mind that the government attacked the nation in spite of scores of records and documentation that the nation has never had no violent intention toward the American people. According to the special agent in charge in an internal FBI, memorandum in Cleveland, Ohio says, although the NOI preaches hatred of whites, which we don't, but this is their report, they have never implemented this hatred by riot or planned violence. Professor Martha F. Lee writes, in many ways, then, the NOI provides a case study of why and how a religious movement with a radical belief system did not engage in violence related to its doctrine. Its members waited in faith for Allah to destroy the forces that oppressed them. Instead, it was law enforcement agencies that more actively fostered violence in the hope of destroying the Nation of Islam. All praise is due to Allah. Some of you know, and you are being well taught by Minister Abdul Malik Saeed as he examines the controversy between Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Jewish community. Well, this is a rabbi that attended the Million Man March. He said, it seems clear to me that despite what I consider to be horrifying insults that have issued from the minister, the people who listen to him do not go chasing down Jews or gays or whites or Koreans to beat them and murder them. They do not do that for two reasons. First, he warns them against such violent behavior. Second, these verbal onslaughts do not constitute the main thrust of his message, as unacceptable as they are. Those are the rabbi's words, not mine. They are also tangential. His listeners know that they are sufferers who know how tough it is to get a fair shake as black people. They want that to change. They hear in Minister Farrakhan's words inspiration and instruction to begin to bring about that change. That is the message on which he focuses and on which they focus. That is not the message on which the media focuses. William Albert's study makes this clear. That's Rabbi Bruce Cohn of Baltimore. Now, do you know, brother and sister, that one of the most popular, probably the most popular youth culture phenomenon is hip-hop culture and music? And as we talked a little bit about yesterday, when I was a teenager and I joined the Nation of Islam, it wasn't difficult because what I heard Minister Farrakhan preaching, what I heard his ministers teaching, it aligned very well with the lyrics of my favorite artists at that time in the early 1990s. I ain't gonna tell y'all what year, I ain't gonna date myself. But it was a while ago. And what's amazing is that in the early 1990s, hip-hop rappers, hip-hop artists, those in the culture, they were like de facto recruiters that were helping Minister Farrakhan in the rebuilding of the Nation of Islam. This ain't just my supposition or biased opinion. Do you know that in the early 1990s, the enemy looked up one day and had discovered that Elijah Muhammad was alive and well inside hip-hop music? This is from 1991. Listen to what they said, brother and sister. Elijah Muhammad, the longtime leader of the Nation of Islam, is having a deep influence on rap music 15 years after his death. Now, those are certainly their words, not mine. 'Cause I don't know about you, but I believe he's alive and well. But I just want to be faithful to the quote so they won't say I changed their words. With unprecedented directness, a number of new rappers are quoting Muhammad's core dogma that white people are a race of devils and snakes, and that African Americans are descendants from the tribe of Shabazz, the original man created by Allah. They always like to take what we teach and try to corrupt it when they put it out in the public. See? They don't give it no context, none of that. But you get the point. The point is that they saw this popular youth phenomenon exploding in America and all over the world. Now remember what Minister Jabril, the great Minister Jabril, shared with us in his writings, documenting what Minister Farrakhan said at Savior's Day 81. That in 1975 there were doctors and nurses who, when they thought the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had died, they were saying that we're so happy that we got rid of that problem. Do you remember the cartoon that's in Closing the Gap from Esquire magazine? All of the world leaders were there, de Gaulle and Moshe Dayan and all of them. And there was a cartoon image of a man on the stage, and he's pointing at a cartoon image of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And the cartoon caption said, if it was not for this N-word, we would have a glorious future. So can you imagine how they felt when they saw that Elijah wasn't going nowhere? That the babies had picked it up like a baby bottle and started nursing from the breast of Elijah. See, now, it's one thing to read the word and to teach it. But if you can take the word and put it into song, that is suggestive of a deeper engagement with that word. That is suggestive of an intimacy with the ideas and concepts comprised in that word. So the powers that be were upset. Now notice the period of time, 1991. Right around the same time that hip-hop music began to change. And you had the first iteration of corporate-sponsored hip-hop music called gangster rap. Right around the same time that they identified that Elijah Muhammad is alive and well in rap music. Not only did they see the messenger, but they saw his chief student and helper. Because around this same time period, they began to talk about how hip-hop, this new influential youth culture phenomenon, had a militant edge. They say playing a substantial role in this genre is the Black Muslim group led by Minister Louis Farrakhan, the Nation of Islam. The group preaches that whites are the root of all evil. See, they're always misrepresenting our teaching. It's only in here to be faithful academically to the quote. That they have stripped blacks of their culture and that the drugs, guns, AIDS of the ghetto are part of a white plot to destroy blacks. Now that part is true. I'm just saying. But our subject is turn my young brothers and sisters over to the Nation of Islam. See, there's a war for the hearts and minds of the people, yes. But there's a greater war for the hearts and minds of the youth. I don't know if you paid attention to what's going on in the culture right now. You know, I still try to keep up with what's going on in hip-hop music. I love a lot of what I see and what I hear from a lot of the new artists. And it was very intriguing to me that almost out of nowhere, without provocation, many of the leading artists began a public controversial beef with one another. Very peculiar. Arsenio used to say things that make you go, Now, all praises due to Allah. Arsenio is somewhere he don't even know he got a round of applause inside Muhammad Mosque. But what it made me think about was some of the things that I had read in the history, particularly in the history of Prophet Muhammad. Check this out, brother and sister. This is an episode from the history, the seerah of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He says, one day a Jewish businessman passed by a group of young Muslims, laughing together and could hardly believe his eyes. They were the Aus and the Khazraj tribe. They were behaving like friends. Such a short time back, they had been at one another's throats, dragging all Medina, Jews and Arabs alike, into a frenzy of killing. It gave this man to wonder if something much worse might not happen to Jews if Arabs should cease to squabble. He sent out young Jews into the streets to remind the Aus and Khazraj of their old bitterness wherever they were seen consorting, and to start whatever other trouble that they could. Think over that. A few months ago, maybe about 3 or 4 months ago now, the leader of the Anti-Defamation League, Jonathan Greenblatt, was overheard in a private conversation talking about, he said, you know, to all of his fellow Confederates who were on this conference call, he said, you know, we've been fighting the wrong fight. We've been in a left-wing versus right-wing battle. He said, but the real fight is the old versus the young. He said, the older generation, they support Israel, but the young generation doesn't. He said, we have a next generation problem. He said, we have a youth problem. He said, we have a TikTok problem. Think over that. Think over that. And how does that align with these beefs that day after day are getting more and more personal? See, in the Nation of Islam, you know we have a lot of adversaries. But in our teaching and our training, we don't involve ourselves in what they call in critical thinking ad hominem attacks. In other words, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Minister Farrakhan teach us you argue principle, you don't argue personal. So I'm never going to come up here and talk about Jonathan Greenblatt's mama or his physical appearance. I will argue against his policy, his principle, his position, his public activity. Because when you get personal, you get down in the gutter. And it's evocative of base human emotion that in the case of hip-hop's history leads to actual physical deaths. So I'm very concerned at what I'm seeing taking place in a beloved culture that has not just lost its way. It's one thing to get lost. It's another thing to be misdirected. And our babies are being misdirected by the same nefarious enemies that are involved in the censorship of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's message. How all of a sudden all the major rappers start a fight while youth all over the world are waking up to who Satan really is. See, America controls Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. They don't control TikTok. And see, with the advent of this thing here, see, brother and sister, this has given rise globally to what they call the citizen journalist. See, there had been a conflict in Israel and Gaza for many years. But before, everybody was depending upon ABC, CBS, and NBC to tell us what was going on. But now people are in the middle of a war zone going live. So people all over the world, they're not listening to the official reports no more. And TikTok is one of those main places where people are just reporting from wherever they are. You see an army inside of a hospital. Did you pay attention that that hospital was named after the Holy Quran? Shifa Hospital. One of the names of the Quran is Al-Shifa, the healing. It's a good name for a hospital. And we never seen an army go into a maternity ward, a cancer ward, intensive care unit. ABC would never have shown that. NBC would never have shown that. So the war over our young people is on. And so when the minister said, turn them over to the nation, that was a declaration that we are involved in this war in a major way on behalf of Allah and his Messiah and his Christ. Do you know, beloved brothers and sisters, they so greatly fear our youth? This is from 1876. Look at the caption. The caption says, in self-defense, Southern chivalry. If I hadn't killed you, you would have grown up to rule me. This is an old Southern cracker killing a little black baby in Harper's Weekly in 1876, right near the end of Reconstruction. See, a lot of people go around and they say, oh, the nation, you all preach separation. And Dr. King, he preached integration. They tried to make it like the nation was an outlier, that most reasonable or decent Negroes, they wanted integration. Not so, brother and sister. When our foreparents left the plantation, we left taking our gifts, skills, and talents with us. We went and purchased land, became homesteaders, and the history says we created upwards of 80 to 100 independent black towns and cities. They only talk to you about Black Wall Street, which was just a section of Tulsa. They don't tell you about all of the others because they don't want you to know that wanting to be free and independent of our slave masters, that's a natural and a good and a healthy reaction to what we've suffered. But Harper said, this image dramatically condemns the brutal racism of some white Southerners against blacks. The white man has killed a black child, and his plea is self-defense. It exemplifies the perspective among Southern whites that Reconstruction had led to black rule. The cartoon appeared just a few weeks before the presidential election. And if you remember, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan talked about the presidential election of 1877 because it was only effectuated by something called the Compromise of 1877 that they called the Great Betrayal of the Negro, because it ended Reconstruction when the North that had won the Civil War told the South, we're no longer going to protect the freed slaves in their settlements. And you can basically do what you can to reinstitute slavery. So, but it shows the links to which, see, the fear. I know President Biden was around talking about replacement theory. I don't know nothing about replacement theory, but our sister, the great sister, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, I like her language a bit better. She talked about the fear of white genetic annihilation. That's a real fear. They don't talk to you about it. It's not talked about in the public. But don't you think it ain't being talked about in private? That's the reason why it appears as though the Congress and the government keeps making policies that don't make sense. Because they're not making policies, they're not creating laws based on anything that they're discussing publicly. They are creating laws based upon their private conversations and their private considerations. Y'all all right? The effect of Satan's sabotage. It's a good book that they talk about in that documentary called City of Quartz. It's about Los Angeles. And our sister, former Nation of Islam member, Dr. Sonia Sanchez, she's the one that coined the phrase that they used as the title verbiage for their documentary. She said, the drug-taking, apathetic young black people we bemoan today are the result of our failure to protect and cherish the Black Panthers during the 60s. And as we already argued, when you're talking about the Panthers, you're really talking about the nation as well, because they emerged ideologically from the preaching of Minister Malcolm X. They even adapted the Muslim program to create the Panther 10-point program. And they are on record giving deference to the nation for their ideology. But what's important is this argument that the crime and the violence that's now ravaging cities all over America is a direct result of this government's destruction of the Panthers, of the nation, of all of these groups that had come together to fight the white power structure. Listen at what she talks about, or listen at what Mr. Mike Davis talks about when he goes into the history of street gang culture in Los Angeles. He said the earliest repeated references to a gang problem in the black community press moreover deal with gangs of white youth who terrorized black residents along the frontiers of the southward expanding Central Avenue ghetto. Indeed, from these newspaper accounts and the recollections of old-timers, it seems probable that the first generation of black street gangs emerged as a defensive response to white violence in the schools and streets during the late 1940s. Let that sink in. The origin of our street organization. And this becomes important because you come to find that many of the brothers and sisters in the street organizations don't even know the history of their street organization. Satan has come in among street organizations and put narcotics there. And that really stifled the evolution of so-called black street gangs into legitimacy. Believe it or not, every ethnic group, every immigrant group that came to America, if you're in a strange land among strange people and you don't speak the language, the Quran says men are the protectors and maintainers of women. So the men folk in the immigrant communities, they organized and banded together to protect their women and children and whatever monies and properties they were acquiring while they were vulnerable in a new society. But over and over again, those gangs or street organizations, as their people became more numerous, they were able to transition into legitimate business. In the nation, many of us love the movie The Godfather. And you see the history of the Italian gang. And you know Michael died trying to go legit. He was trying to take the family out of the business that his father had established. But when his father established it, that was the only business available to immigrant Italians at that time. You watch the movie Gangs of New York, it talks about the Irish gang. Where did the Irish go? They went into law enforcement. You can't have a fallen police officer and they don't bring out the bagpipes. That's the legacy of the influence of the Irish in the law enforcement industry. The Jews had gangs. They were able to legitimize. Why was not the Bloods and the Crips and the Vice Lords and the Gangster Disciples able to go legit? It's a sociological phenomenon. Gangs ain't nothing new, and they're not nothing necessarily evil either. But the government, fearing the rise of black people in America, determined to keep our black street organizations from evolving and following that common evolutionary trajectory. Y'all all right? Aside from defending black teenagers from racist attacks, which continued through the 1950s under the aegis of such white gangs as the Spook Hunters. Let's listen at that. Gangs called the Spook Hunters. The early South Central gangs, the businessmen, the Slausons, the Gladiators, the farmers, Parks, Outlaws, Watts, Boot Hill, Rebel Rousers, Roman 20s, and so forth, were also the architects of social space in new and usually hostile settings. I think I got some alumni of these organizations in the audience. Well, my brothers know I'm telling you the truth. South Central gang youth coming under the influence of the Muslims. And the long-distance charisma of Malcolm X began to reflect the generational awakening of black power. Now, do you think they were just going to let that continue, Minister Mustaqim? No. Now, y'all mind if I get spiritual for a moment? I want to talk about this concept of Messiah. And it's a big deal, Messiah. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said this in one of my favorite quotes. He said, "The white man of America is well informed through his scientists and scholars who are paid just for studying the problems of prophecy, and especially the future destruction of America, which he knows is fast coming. His greatest mental burden and physical strain at the present time is how to prevent the spread of Islam among his ex-servitude slaves in these last days." That's rather profound, don't you think? We've heard of the Department of Defense, the Department of Trade and Commerce, the Department of Education, FEMA, etc. They never talked about those that are on the payroll who study prophecy. They don't study according to his language the benefit of prophecy. The problem of prophecy. Well, who is prophecy a problem for? But the wicked. See, I love this because, again, we think that everything they tell us on the 6 o'clock news, that's all they're concerned about. That's all that they know about. See? So y'all think those of us who are in the nation, we just conspiracy theorists. No, privately, the government studies the problems of prophecy. And they have an understanding of who you are and where you fit within prophecy. Now, this idea of Messiah is big, especially where our suffering, as we talked about yesterday, it is the suffering of a people that produces the intervention of God. Have y'all ever seen that movie, the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman? Starring Minister Farrakhan's cousin, the great Cicely Tyson. In that film, there are scenes where Cicely, as Miss Jane Pittman, would always playfully talk to the newborn babies and ask them, "Is you the one?" Miss Jane, what you talking about? One what? Says anytime a child is born, old people look in his face and ask him if he's the one. I seem to remember a book called This Is the One. The most honored Elijah Muhammad. See, as we talked about yesterday, in our enslaved foreparents who didn't have a BS or MA or PhD, they just was listening. Many of them couldn't read, but they heard the Bible preached. They heard a man named Moses being described. They heard about the enslaved children of Israel. And they had a natural reaction that what God had done in biblical times, they should expect in modern times. They wasn't looking for help coming from the government. They were looking for help coming from your womb. Do you know that this idea of Messiah is really, 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 really big? Professor Hugh Schoenfield writes in his book, The Mystery of the Messiah, what has to be clarified and appreciated is that the Bible presents us not only with an individual Messiah, but also essentially with a Messiah collective. The Messiahship is shared. The nation Messiah. I'm going to say that again. The nation Messiah would have to be singular among the nations, set apart for the service and benefit of all peoples, and as a mediator between God and mankind. He says the Messianic requires us to read and study the books of Moses with a new appreciation and insight, not as something relating to a past experience which has been superseded, but as something of present and future relevance to that ideal world economy which would come to be expressed as the kingdom or rule of God on earth. Yes, sir. So this is the nation of Islam, but it's the nation Messiah. Yes, sir. And he talks about how in the Moses preaching to the children of Israel was a law that constituted a special training in order for us to actually fulfill the role of Messiah. See, when you and I understand our destiny, we understand why Master Fard Muhammad had to give us a restrictive law of Islam. Not to curtail your personal preferences and privileges, but that you and I might actually be able to fulfill the role that we are destined to fulfill as a messianic people. You don't expect the Messiah to be getting high now, do you? You don't expect the Messiah to be getting drunk now, do you? You expect the Messiah to be those in whom God's Spirit lives and operates for the benefit of others. Now, I said the wise don't look for the Messiah to float in from the cosmos. The Messiah is to be born. You know, sister, they call the Messiah the desire of women. That's strange use of language, isn't it? Because in this old wicked world, when we think of desire, we only think carnal. But it ain't a carnal desire. It goes to the tradition among the Jewish people. It says it was the hope of every Jewish mother that her child might be the key to Israel's future. With the pain of labor came the comforting thought, maybe my child will fulfill God's promise to the nation. Maybe my boy will be the Messiah. Moreover, in the Jewish culture, it was every Orthodox Jewish handmaiden's desire to be the mother of the Messiah. This goes back to Genesis 3:15, where it is clearly stated that the promised Messiah would come from the seed of a woman. It is for this reason there is a belief that the Jewishness of a person depends on his or her mother being Jewish. Wow. Now that's strange because they have never taught this to our sisters.
No, sir.
It's even more strange when once again you consider that our interaction with the Jewish community has never exposed this to us. In fact, right now, black music is controlled by men mainly from the Jewish community. They're not the artists, but they're the gatekeepers. They control who becomes popular, who becomes widely known. And over again, while they are privately educating their daughters that they will one day give birth to the Messiah, they put before our audience artists like Sexy Red, Suki Hana, and Glorilla, who disrespect themselves and their people with the kind of musical expression that they are representative of. Why have the Jewish controllers of black music not put out a modest woman to entertain the public? See? You say, well, oh, that ain't what the people want. You got to give the people what they want. Until you realize that the scientists will tell you that what the people want is conditioned. Your desire is based on social conditions. And the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan have said that the enemy right now is busy socially engineering savagery among our people. All praise is due to Allah. I got to move fast, brothers and sisters. They gave me a timestamp, but we're going to move fast in these final 3,000 slides. I only got 2,998 to go. But by Allah's grace and mercy, we'll get through it. Do you know that the wise in America privately believe that in order for them to be safe, you and I must be savage? C.L.R. James, in his excellent book, The Black Jacobins, writes, and they took great pains that the Negro should remain the brute beast they wanted him to be. Not that he was that, but that they wanted him to be. The safety of the whites demands that we keep the Negroes in the most profound ignorance. I have reached the stage of believing firmly that one must treat Negroes as one treats beasts. Wow. A few years ago, our sister, and to me, that's the best picture she ever took. Dressed like you all are dressed today as a modest woman of God.
but she began to lament as her handlers had used her to put out a certain type of imagery among young women. In Elle magazine, our sister Nicki Minaj is quoted as saying, "Maybe I was naive, but I didn't realize how many girls were modern-day prostitutes. Whether you're a stripper, whether you're an Instagram girl, these girls are so beautiful and they have so much to offer. But I started finding out that you give them a couple $1,000s and you can have sex with them," added Nicki. "I was like, yikes. It's just sad that they don't know their worth. It makes me sad as a woman, and it makes me sad that maybe I've contributed to that in some way." I just don't think that if girls who look up to me think that when I'm posting sexy pictures that I'm actually the antithesis of all of that. In a lot of ways, I don't know if I'm doing the same thing they're doing because I'm selling sex appeal. So I can't look down on these girls, said Minaj. I may not be having sex with people, but I'm still selling sex appeal. Wow. See, so the target for the youth invariably involves the woman. Do you know what's even more shocking? Is that a few years ago, around this same time period, the U.S. government decided that they would threaten Central and South American countries with sanctions if they would continue to promote breastfeeding among their women. You don't believe that. Fortunately, I brought the receipts. Opposition to breastfeeding resolution by U.S. stuns the World Health officials. See, remember what I just said? When they do things that don't make sense, that are illogical, it's because they're operated from a private fear, a private set of concerns that they don't make public. Central America, South America have been oppressed. And they know that from the womb of the oppressed comes Messiah. See, a baby ain't just getting milk or food from mother's breast, but he's drinking in, she's drinking in mother's hopes, mother's fears, mother's cares, mother's concern. And then that new body is the hope and the potential to be a relief to the burden of mother. So America said, well, we don't want you feeding your own baby from your own breast, because we don't want no black Messiah in America. We don't want no Mexican Messiah in Mexico. We don't want a Chilean Messiah in Chile. We don't want a Brazilian Messiah in Brazil. So these wicked bastards had the nerve enough to sanction poor women in Central and South America just for doing what God breathed them to do, is put their own baby on their own breast. A resolution to encourage breastfeeding was expected to be approved quickly and easily by the hundreds of government delegates who gathered this spring in Geneva for the United Nations affiliated World Health Assembly. Based on decades of research, the resolution says that mother's milk is the healthiest for children, and countries should strive to limit the inaccurate or misleading marketing of breast milk substitutes. Then the United States delegation, and good old USA, embracing interests of infant formula manufacturers, upended the resolution. The Americans were blunt. In other words, they was gangster. If Ecuador refused to drop the resolution, Washington would unleash punishing trade measures and withdraw crucial military aid. The Ecuadorian government quickly acquiesced. We were shocked because we didn't understand how such a small matter like breastfeeding could provoke such a dramatic response, said the Ecuadorian official who asked not to be identified. because she was afraid of losing her job.
Make it make sense. Yes, sir. Man, you teach. Make it make sense. Make it make sense.
The fear of a Messiah has caused the enemy to target our women and target our babies. So that puts a great responsibility on our shoulders, brother. We want to close with the antidote. Can I have 10 minutes? Praise be to Allah. Thank you for being so generous, sir. Now, this is President Lyndon Baines Johnson. Do you know that he publicly acknowledged what America has done to black men? Now, when you read this, this ain't someone from the Nation of Islam or some black nationalist group. This is the President of the United States of America, speaking at Howard University. He said, perhaps most important is influence radiating to every part of life is the breakdown of the Negro family structure. For this, most of all, white America must accept responsibility. It flows from centuries of oppression and persecution of the Negro man. It flows from the long years of degradation and discrimination which have attacked his dignity and assaulted his ability to produce for his family. This too is not pleasant to look upon, but it must be faced by those whose serious intent is to improve the life of all Americans. President Lyndon Baines Johnson, admitting the destruction of the black man in America. But when Allah in the person of Master Farah Muhammad came, he came with the antidote. He said, make all men and boys join the FOI and train them fast to be brave fighters, to be willing at any time to give their life for Allah's sake and righteousness. The Quran says, so they put them to flight by Allah's permission. And David slew Goliath. And Allah gave him the kingdom and wisdom and taught him of what he pleased. And were it not for Allah's repelling some men by others, the earth would certainly be in a state of disorder, but Allah is full of grace to the world. Men to repel men, restored men, not broken men, but Allah came and set up a class. And the class starts by processing. But how many of us know processing never really ends? Because until we become one with Allah, we're still in the process. This is one of the old, where they talked about how all of the different people in the business world, they love Mr. Muhammad's male followers. Said Mr. Muhammad's worst critics admit the brothers in the FOI are the most courteous, mannerly, neat, clean, intelligent, industrious, as well as militant workers that they have ever met. It is a known fact the Muslim brother is never out of work because even Jews and Christians would rather hire him knowing he won't get drunk, never be rude, will always be on time, and give them a fair amount of labor for his wages. So apparently the antidote works. What did American society do to our sisters? Incidents in The Life Girl by Linda Brent. She talks about Harriet Jacobs' story. Said the slave girl is raised in an atmosphere of licentiousness and fear. The lash and the foul talk of her master and his sons are her teachers. When she is 14 or 15, her owner or his sons or the overseer or perhaps all of them begin to bribe her with presents. If these fail to accomplish their purpose, she is whipped and starved into submission to their will. So when the Savior came, he gave us the antidote. All praises be to Allah. Allahu Akbar. He created a male-free sanctuary our women to come in and get involved in a process to heal us of the brokenness that living in this kind of society has inflicted upon us. See, that's why we have to always make love and compassion in the atmosphere among a people whom a society has worked so hard to break. It's a shame that publicly the black man and black woman is frequently presented as objects of scorn and ridicule. Yet it's our blood, sweat, and tears that made America. Rarely do you see us presented as objects of sympathy and compassion. That's reserved for Israel. Ain't reserved for you. But you know, one day they're going to wake up and realize who are the real children of Israel. I close with just a few statements on the efficacy of the antidote. Because again, this is all the justification for Minister Farrakhan's bold claim at Savior's Day. His declaration of war. Turn our young brothers and sisters over to the nation. Well, why should you turn them over to the nation? You got the antidote. All praise is due to Allah. Do you know, brother and sister, that they have documented that Minister Farrakhan is able to attract a larger audience than any other black spokesperson? Do you know that he's not just attracting large audiences, but it says of Minister Farrakhan, Farrakhan has a unique capability. What is that unique capability? He's able to reach deeply into the souls of black youth. He's able to talk to them in a way that really makes them listen. This rapport enables Farrakhan to criticize and redirect destructive behavior patterns. In other words, the minister doesn't just countenance the waywardness of our youth, but because of his love for our youth, they will listen and allow Farrakhan to offer a word of criticism. And it's never good, beloved brother and sister, to start with criticism. Never good to start with, you should have did this, you should have did that, when someone is coming to you for help. Wasn't it Jesus somewhere in the New Testament that told the disciples, when the hungry man come to you, don't seek to preach to him, feed him. Feed the hungry man, and then after that, perhaps he might listen to a wise word coming from your mouth. He even said that in South Central LA is nearly unanimous in its support for the Nation of Islam. Minister Farrakhan and his disciples are a force for good with the community's young men. Many neighborhood leaders say, and the police must somehow learn to coexist with these zealous young men in their suits and bow ties. It may well be that suspicions on both sides, fueled in part by Farrakhan's separatist ideology, have made it difficult for the police and the Muslims to find common ground. But the truly sad fact is that both sides essentially want the same thing: to put an end to the drug anarchy that has laid waste to so many lives. Point is that this slide is called the positive side of an anti-Semite. And what Reverend Alpers was showing in his trial report is that inasmuch as the mainstream media criticizes Minister Farrakhan and falsely labels him as an anti-Semite, the minister's record among our people is one of good works. And one where the young people who are out here involved in criminal activity, they can find guidance coming from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. What did James Baldwin have to say? He said Elijah Muhammad has been able to do what generations of welfare workers and committees and resolutions and reports and housing projects and playgrounds have failed to do: to heal and redeem drunkards and junkies, to convert people who have come out of prisons and to keep them out, to make men chaste and women virtuous, and to invest both the male and female with a pride and a serenity that hang about them like an unfailing light. He has done all these things which our Christian church has spectacularly failed to do. Now that's significant because our brother was in the LGBT community before it was called the LGBT community. But that was a man that loved the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and recognized his beneficial impact on our people. When Minister Farrakhan was called to Philadelphia, this is Jewish Mayor Edwin Rendell. Not that his religion matters. If he's a good mayor, he's a good mayor. If he's a bad mayor, he's a bad mayor. But it's significant because the Jews condemned Minister Farrakhan for alleged acts of anti-Semitism. They are completely wrong. So it's very significant that a Jewish mayor of a major American city to prevent a pending race riot. This was the Grays Ferry affair. Our young sister and her son walking through Grays Ferry was attacked by some young white hooligans. And Minister Farrakhan's great minister, who we'll be with next weekend in Philadelphia, Minister Rodney Muhammad, he had a radio program, and they were calling for 1,000 brothers to march through Grays Ferry. In other words, okay, y'all attacked our sister, well, her brothers have showed up. You know, kind of like Malcolm said in the movie, these are Brother Johnson's brothers. Look outside the window, because ain't nothing moving till we see about Brother Johnson. That's my favorite scene in the whole movie. When Brother Johnson's brothers came to see about him. So Minister Rodney was about to send the brothers into Grays Ferry. And everybody was alarmed because, you know, Philly, one of them kind of cities like L.A. See? And, well, he called Minister Farrakhan. He called the minister to bring peace, to bring conflict resolution. But I thought he'd teach hate. I mean, I thought he would throw gas on the fire. But the Jewish mayor called the minister, and before the minister spoke, he said all these glowing things about the Nation of Islam. Again, our subject as we conclude, turn my young brothers and sisters over to the nation. He said, I would like to thank the Nation of Islam here in Philadelphia, to thank them for what you stand for all the good that it does for so many people in Philly. And if there's anybody out here who doesn't know that this is a faith that has its principles as the family, this is a faith that doesn't just talk about family values, it lives family values. This is a faith where men respect their women and children, and they manifest that faith by staying in the home with them. This is a faith that doesn't just talk about being against drugs, but is out there every single day and night fighting against drugs. This is a faith that just doesn't talk about the values of education. It imbues in their children in schools that education is the way to opportunity. Turn my young brothers and sisters over to the nation. This is from the House of Un-American Activities in the state of California. Once upon a time, they tried to say that the Nation of Islam was un-American. Well, depends on how you define American. That could be a good thing. Because if you define it by her foreign policy, heck, if you define it by her domestic policy, being other than that might be a good thing. You know, sometimes being unorthodox ain't a bad thing. Because they say the nation is unorthodox Islam. But the word orthodox only means that which is accepted. The accepted version. Well, now, if y'all in the business of accepting sin, accepting evil, accepting deviation, if that has become the norm, then sign me up for being unorthodox. I'll take unorthodox over that kind of orthodox. I'm just giving you a little ammunition as we land the plane, because when the minister makes that claim, I want to show you that there's firm justification for that claim. It says the rigid discipline and fanatic faith have produced amazing results in rehabilitating many semi-literate Negroes who are alcoholics, drug addicts, and habitual criminals. Now, my only asterisk to that statement is this. Gone are the days where you could just say the message of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is for a certain demographic of our people. See, I can justify this, but I push back against it too. See, I can justify it because the same criticism was hurled at Noah. A lot of folk didn't want to follow Noah because, as the Quran says, they said of Noah, only the meanest of the people are with you. So for a long time, they only wanted to say that the nation's message was attracted to brothers and sisters who have been in prisons and in the streets and stuff like that. And it hides and obscures the fact that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's message is attracted to the minds of our people at every level of the socio-economic ladder. Whether you've been in the school of hard knocks, Harvard, Yale, Howard, Spelman, Morehouse, there is a profundity in the divine message of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that attracts our people's mind. So, beloved brother and sister, I'm going to give you one last slide because I have to give it to you from Mr. Pipes, who is one of our great critics. He says that a well-established pattern of African Americans who, finding their reputation in tatters, turn to the Nation of Islam, which then provides them with solace and help. This slide is here to show that even though Minister Farrakhan's Jewish critics oppose him, they at the same time acknowledge his beneficial role in the lives of our people. Yes, sir. The word solace, I didn't know what it was because I told y'all yesterday I went to the public food system. So I looked it up. It says comfort in sorrow, misfortune or trouble, alleviation of distress or discomfort. So Mr. Pipes is really bearing witness to the salvific effect of the Nation of Islam in the lives of our people. In other words, the nation acts as a Messiah among the people. Because that's what the Messiah brings: solace, help, a relief of the burdens of the people. Now, if he's from the Jewish community, they're supposed to be the people of God. Shouldn't they be helping us in this work? But over and over again, they are in opposition to the salvific and messianic work of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Time is upon us, beloved brothers and sisters. It is our prayer that there's something that we shared with you today you would deem beneficial in your own continued growth and development. We leave you as we came before you in the greeting words of peace. Assalamu alaikum.